First of all, we have Minister Walter Ayasta, who's the Minister of Energy and Mines in Peru. A big round of applause for the Minister. And then from Spain, we have Joan Groisar, the Secretary of State for Energy in Spain. Nice to see you, Minister. Please take a seat. Thank you. Grab a seat. And then from Sierra Leone, we're also honoured to be joined by the Deputy Minister of Energy, Edmund Noni. Edmund, please, Deputy Minister. Thank you. And then we're also very pleased to be joined by Marie-Claude Dumas, President of WSP in Canada. Marie-Claude. Thank you. Please. And last but not at all least, we have Lavinia Bauer-Roche, Global Head of Sustainable Finance from Deutsche Bank. Lavinia. Thank you. Please. Pleasure. So friends, thanks all for joining us and thank you for staying with us. This is the closing panel of the first day of the conference, and many of you have been in many sessions here together, but also in separate sessions. Our ministerial colleagues were with us in a ministerial roundtable on this side earlier today, and then our business leaders were with us for the CEO and business leader roundtable on the other side. So part of the point of this session is to hear inputs from our excellent colleagues, but also for them to report to each other and to all of us in terms of the discussions they had in the different rooms. And colleagues, if you have headsets, this will be another bilingual session, so please do come ready. So I'll start with you, Minister Ayasta, if I may, please. So thank you for joining us. And I was in the session earlier when you gave us the Peruvian perspective on some of the energy issues. So you might like to tell us a little bit about Peru's priorities, but I'd also like you to say, based on what you've heard today, what do you think are some of the key demand-side policy actions available to governments that you consider the most priority? So please.
Hello. Bueno, muchas gracias.
Thank you so much. To say hello to everyone. Thank you for being here. In relation to this subject, to what we're looking for in energy efficiency, it's clear to reducing the consumption of energy of the users. We have different types of users, domestic, commercial, industrial. In this reach, it's very important to keep into consideration infrastructure in which we have to give the service to the user. Our final user is the user, the final user. In that sense, the infrastructure that we must guarantee to give a quality service to be competitive with the new developments that we have in technologies. We must be speaking of infrastructure in which operations is autonomous. In the sense, we have been working and implementing the intelligent networks, where if I give the example, 10 years ago, to be able to implement measuring in the networks with high tension, we had to implement the equipment, the sensor, and other equipment that required energy. Now, we have sensors that automatically connect to the network, and directly with a telecommunication system, we may have information in real time in the network. Now, there we're reducing equipment that one way or another consumes energy. All the equipment that we have now is associated to the Sayodit. If we speak about Madrid, what we want to improve in all the enterprises is that the equipment that we're replacing is precisely associated to the CVP that allows us to have information in real time to monitor the quality of the service to evaluate the losses. The other matter that we have in infrastructure is the energy transition to integrate the renewable energies within the network. Other subject, the client itself. The client, because everything that we do is to give a better service to our clients, and the client is a digital client. Thanks to the pandemic, one way or another, we increased the volume of people that had more access to the internet. And we have a client that is more demanding. For that, the different businesses had to take actions to be able to implement platforms that could give a better service. Now we have the intelligent measures to incentivize the renewable energies, to implement the solar panels, but the infrastructure that is still prevailing in the meter system is unidirectional. We have the smart meters, where it's a bidirectionality, where clients may inject energy to the network. And this generates with a lot of benefits to the state enterprise to have more information, but thinking about the client is going to have more information in real time and new services to the client. So the client needs to be trained to reduce the cost, not the consumption, but to be able to use energy in the best time where it's cheaper. So we have a new type of tariff that the client is going to have. So in this case, one of the matters that we're going to improve is to have these smart meters for users. The other subject I discussed about infrastructure that should have equipment associated to the SIOTET. We also mentioned the meters that is going to give a better service to the users, but also to the enterprise, to the business that gives variables to give a better service to the users. But all of these equipments generates a huge database. So we started to discuss governance. We must work with this structure so that the enterprises have clear what is data governance, to have the next step, to be able to use artificial intelligence. If we don't have a big database, hardly will be able to exploit information in real time or to have results with indicators.
And another reason as well, if we go into more specific, which is cyber safety. And it's already been mentioned, but it is so significant because we have, we may have a lot of issues with that. And the other thing that we have to keep in mind, because that is also going to be significant, is talent in the workforce. We have to have a prepared workforce to be able to use these tools. It's not so difficult now. The technology is pretty accessible, but what is most important is that they have free access. We've been talking about implementing different platforms for over 10 years to be able to analyze data. And now we have free access platforms, which our staff has to be trained to be able to use the information. Another subject is one of cultural change, or shift rather, because of this technology coming in to the society, the processes, the way that we do things, all of that is changing within all companies. So the operations, the way of managing commercial activities and trade, all of that is being changed. In one way or another, these are the pillars that are so important that we have to keep in mind. it's important that we keep that in mind as a state, that we have to be able to strengthen it, that we be able to support it, so that we be able to have something better for the consumers and for our clients.
Interesting range of issues you brought up, which I hope we can touch on some of these issues. But one theme through your remarks was technology, and particularly digital technology, AI, and how much that is enabling so many things, but also then sets its own agenda. And maybe that's a way in to bring you in, Secretary Groizot, because another theme we've had a lot today is affordability and efficiencies based on affordability. But as the Minister has reminded us, the energy system is going through a change towards electrification, towards digital technology, a lot of investment required, a lot of new technology coming aboard. How do we do that transition while keeping the focus on affordability at the same time?
So thank you very much for the invitation. I'm going to intervene in Spanish just to give people time again to connect. Lo primero.
So the first thing is that, yes, we are talking about a change of model towards electrification, towards electricity, so more technological development of the entire system. And this has to be done in a way that will not sacrifice affordability and accessibility. Those two things don't have to be separate. You know, something that is efficient, more renovated, more revamped, more electrified is not necessarily separate from something that is affordable and accessible. So this model has to go through energy efficiency, that is to do more with less. It goes through renewable energies because it's the most competitive, the cheaper way of generating electric energy, at least in Spain. As well as and the electrification brings all of those things together. It's what allows us to translate this into a competitive advantage. Electrification is energy efficiency in itself. A thermal pump, for example, or a vehicle, electric vehicle, are a lot more efficient than, you know, what we could have been using up until now. But in order to be able to get there, we have to make sure that the price signals of tarification be more competitive, that it be cheaper, and that is what we're talking about in Spain. And if we're talking about the bills and you know, we're working on all of that. So first, the raw matter, the most fundamental aspect, to look for the most competitive energy. And for us, it's renewable energy in Spain. We are lucky that we're going into the penetration of this, and the price of energy is something, usually it's at least 15% lower. And that is why electrification prices in Spain have been protected to a certain way, you know, because of the Iran crisis. And so the raw matter is most important. So we're talking here about the raw matters and auxiliary services, which are the things that connect to the system to be able to operate it. This is something where renewable energies can give us these services more competitively, whether it be, you know, like technical elements that connect the different systems so that they can be operated, you know, that can offer competitivity. Electric networks, we have to have better grids. And here we're also orienting in order to be as efficient as possible. So we're using the existing grids, first of all, making sure that only mature projects that are really feasible, that really have the possibility of consuming, those who will be connecting to the network and the grid, and going towards real demand, not development grids just because we want to, but directing it to new sectors of demand. And finally, fiscality. Fiscality is one of the main tools that any government has in public policy and to be able to govern public policy. And today in Spain, we have announced the derogation, the suppression, that is, of the taxes on renewable energy. So there's going to be a phase-out calendar to be able to continue giving that signal towards electrification, to make sure that electricity be more competitive, and so that decisions of going towards that will be more competitive and easier to adopt. And another element, and that will be my last point, the digitalization and using data centers for AI. In Spain, what we decided is the development of data centers is going to have to be green. In Spain, these centers, what does that mean? What it means that they're going to have to bring their own energy. So they bring your own energy model. What does that mean? What it means that each energy consumption unit is going to have, of data centers, is going to have also a capacity of renewable energy in terms of correlation that is temporal. What we cannot allow is that this create a new demand, and that will compete for clean competitive energy that manufacturers need, that plants need, and that homes need. So we can't create that competition. They have to bring their own. And so that will bring new renewable energy with which everybody can take advantage of that renewable energy without competing with other consumers who also need that clean, competitive energy. So accessibility for us cannot be separate from renewable energies, from energy efficiency and electrification. All of that goes together.
Congratulations on the new announcements today. And both of our speakers have spoken in that wider systemic way about it's not just supply over here or demand over here, it's about supply and demand, particularly in the future of electricity, which has a much more dynamic kind of model. And you described it very well. And the ministry used the term culture change, but if I could just stay with you for a minute, Ran, because you described a new relationship between the consumer and the electricity system, so in terms of time of use and interactivity and signals. So is there an element of culture change then across society that you're going to be embarking on?
Son varias cosas.
There are many things. In Spain, it goes together. It's kind of controversial when we introduce tariffs in different moments, like different times. There are moments in which using electricity is cheaper, more competitive than at other times. And that is, it generated, a cultural shock because there are people who are like, there are things that we can't really change. And we're seeing that there is an hourly tariff change, and that has changed. Before, it was cheaper to use energy at night. Because these were quieter times when there was less consumption. Now, and then it became at lunch when there was a lot of generation. So it was a more competitive way of to generate a change of behavior. But where we have to adapt the demand to that availability of energy is in the industrial sector, because those are managers who can adapt their energy consumer profile. And we're seeing a lot of interest to have thermal storage. So to have processes that use heat, that use thermal storage to be able to use the energy when it's cheaper, more competitive, and after that they can move that consumption at other times of the day. So that's a cultural change from from the way that people do their day-to-day, but also companies, who are modifying their way of doing things to be more efficient in energy speak as well.
A couple of things I will definitely come back to, but let's turn now to Deputy Minister Noney. Deputy Minister, thanks for being with us. It's great to have your perspective. And I'd be interested in any reflections you have on the day, but particularly picking up on what we heard from Joanne about this focus on consumers and protecting consumers. And of course, it's been a hard time recently to be an energy consumer. There's been a lot of shocks and bumps and uncertainties. So maybe how do you see the role of efficiency then in terms of protecting the consumer and building their resilience?
For us, and thank you again for the wonderful panel so far. And the event has been extremely educational, and I've definitely learned a lot being here and listening to various speakers. In Africa as a whole, we're going through an interesting period because similar to the telecommunications industry, where a lot of African countries and a lot of rural communities in Africa did not have access to landline phones. So you saw this immediate leapfrog to mobile telephony. So we're seeing something very similar in energy. So for us, for example, our smallest unit of local government, we have 190 municipalities. Most of them prior to, I'd say, the last 10, 12 years were not electrified. Over the last 7 years, we've installed 100 solar mini grids in these 190 communities, which means that those consumers' first experience with electricity is solar. So it's renewable first, and now we've started installing more battery systems to be able to store and re-inject energy into the grid at times when solar is not available. Another thing we're looking at is micro hydro or floating hydro. Hydro projects typically are very expensive, as we all know, and they also take several years to build as compared to solar. But we're seeing new technologies where the turbine floats in the water, which you're now looking at 6 months lead time to construct and then another 3 months to have the community connected. So we're very interested to see if we can do a solar mini grid with a micro floating hydro mix as well. And I'm proud to say that we've secured financing for another 62 solar mini grids out of the 190, so we're very close to our target of electrification of all those small municipalities. So given that a lot of our rural communities are being connected with renewable first and are already experiencing efficiencies at the generation level, we've also taken several steps to look at household use. And by that I mean we've gone beyond just let's put a solar mini grid there and they have access to their house. We're now looking at what fridges are you using, what fans are you using, how can we give them access to systems that are more efficient. Major government policy we've done towards that is we've removed all imports duties for any renewable imports, whether it's solar panels or batteries or the direct appliances. So that's how we're trying to get to the consumer level and enhance people's lives through efficiency. But another very important piece of efficiency, which if we leave behind, we're not really tackling how the entire country uses electricity in an efficient way, it's mining. So Sierra Leone has over 17 critical and I would say foundational minerals. Most of those mining operations, we've seen them using diesel generators to power their electricity needs. So what we're doing now is we are looking, we're promoting private sector to come in and identify mining provinces and mining operations to power via solar and hydro. So we have over 2,000 megawatts peak of hydro, and we have 2,000 megawatts peak of solar and 3,000 megawatts of hydro available. And so we're trying to look for partners who will be looking at bringing in renewable energy into that mining sector, and encouraging the mining companies, once they have this cheaper electricity, that you have to do value addition as well, and not just export raw minerals. So it's that balance of, because a lot of our areas are now is when we're having, I would say, an energy revolution. We get to use the new technologies first, but we also end up having to do everything at all ends of the sector all at the same time.
Thank you. It's fascinating, and congratulations on your progress. And as you just said, you're absolutely right. You're undergoing an energy revolution, and I spoke to Joanne about culture change, but then you described whole communities who went from no electrification to cutting-edge technology, which is really interesting. And again, just staying with you on that point, engaging with communities who become electrified and suddenly have the latest technology and all the implications of that, that must be a project in itself. It's not just a technical project, but it's a social project as well.
Yeah, it is. And it's really, I would say, heartwarming, or it's really encouraging to see the difference that electricity makes in people's lives, and not just at the household or use for lighting and charging phones, but we also see great stories when it comes to farmers being able to keep some of their crops now, local fisherwomen being able to refrigerate and on-sell to markets that are further afield. So it's also a massive economic engine that we're putting into these rural communities.
Yes, very much so. Thank you very much. Marie-Claude, thanks for being with us. And just before this session, we were in the CEO roundtable. I didn't catch it all, but I got a real vibe about let's stop talking and let's do things. And I think maybe in your daily life, that's probably your mantra anyway, because you work with a lot of businesses and a lot of governments. So maybe tell us a bit about that in terms of this theme that I hear a lot, which is how do we just not just kind of say these things are good, how do we not just kind of broadly say we're in favor of them, but actually make things happen on the ground?
I think, thank you for having me, first of all, and it's great to hear the panelists. I think for energy efficiency and the transition that we're going through, long-term commitment is really important. The different governments have different incentives, different strategies, but it's really important to keep that long-term commitment, because we spoke a lot about energy efficiency. With that comes innovation, with that comes change, like culture change and all of it. If we want financing to be available, if there was a change in government, they should be at least to say, we're going to honor what was done in the past. What was done in the past, or those contracts, those tariffs, those grants are going to be honored for the future. And at least it will help. It will allow people to have trust in the system and to believe in a different future. So I think it's stability in the rules is really important, because energy efficiency is more than cost savings. It's about the whole system, the reduction in consumption, the promotion of energy reuse. Why don't we look at retrofits versus changing all the windows? Like, it needs to be more than just the cost savings. And I think that we at the previous session, it was really interesting. We had a very, very diversified groups, people from all around the world, and the situation is extremely different in North America than it is in Europe, Latin America, and Africa, in Asia, in India. So it's very different everywhere. And sometimes, but we need to commit to this energy efficiency. And in North America, for example, sometimes it's hard to make the business case because the cost of energy is not high enough to make the business case happen. So there, the governments need to take a stand and say, or the policymakers to say, okay, well, we'll bridge that gap or half the gap, but because we're serious for the long term, you'll be able to find private financing for the second half, let's say. So stability in the long term is really important. And the other piece that was talked about a lot is also clarity in the messaging. So it was funny because a lot of people were saying, oh, we're advising companies on how to understand government programs. Well, why don't we make these programs understandable by a human being so that companies or end customers can actually say, you know what, I understand what this means. I'm going to commit to it, get the financing, and do it. I think we need to have clarity in the messaging, and also simple enough to understand so that you don't need so many, consultants and helps and reports to then be able to decide what you're going to commit to as a consumer or as a business.
Thank you. And when you talk about long-term stability and consistency of policy, I get that, but I was thinking to myself, can I think of many good examples of that happening? And so I'm going to ask you two versions of this question. You can decide which one, because the simple one is, if you want to name names, who's doing this well in terms of regions or governments or that are doing well on long-term consistency, or if you want to not take it that way, what are the conditions that create that long-term certainty? Because I'm thinking governments change, elections happen, crises happen. I'll come to climate in a few minutes, but we see climate ebbing and flowing, let's be frank, in terms of sometimes it's higher on the agenda, sometimes it's not. So tell us a bit more about how we get to that long-term stability.
So I'll give you an example. The person sitting next to me at the table was from India, and she spoke a lot about the carbon credits. And I said, oh, how long have you had those for? She said 10 years, and they've been proven to be efficient. So in North America, like they were off 6 months in, so it didn't get the momentum that it didn't. So I'm using carbon credit as an example, but I think that if we want people to trust the system. So to say, okay, this is going to be in place, and for you who committed to it in 2026, when the government changes in 2028, you're still good, and your financing is still valid. So if you have private financing, you won't be stuck, because they also will know that this is kind of grandfathered or is good to go. So I think it can apply to many, because governments change often around the world, and it's every government's choice to kind of lead the way they want to. But I think that so that's why I'm not saying for the future, but at least for the past. And hopefully that will create enough momentum to say, well, look at this, it's been happening for 15 years with only a few companies, but it's still working, and then maybe we can prove the point for a larger, kind of a larger rollout, if you want, of a specific technology.
That's very clear. Thank you very much, Marie-Claude. Lavinia, first of all, thanks for your patience being last to be brought in. But actually, in a way, you're the glue that holds this all together, because every intervention so far has talked about investment, right, and finance and different types of finance mechanisms. And that's the space you work in. So tell us a bit about how you see the role of financial institutions in the kind of messages you're hearing here about the need for investment, the need to enhance affordability, security, the need to electrify. It all hinges on finance, right?
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. A very insightful day and conversation, so no patience required. I would love to start with a reflection point I'm being presented with a lot of times, and I would love to conquer a little bit. And I hear a lot that there's a lack of capital or a lack of finance. And actually that's not quite meeting my observations. So I'm globally engaging with corporate clients on finding finance and capital to invest in their measures which they need for decarbonization or other sustainability needs, being it water management, efficiency gains, you name it. I feel there's quite some competition. There's capital out at very, very low price points, which is looking for the right type of projects. And I think it's a lot about identifying the right types of projects or making them bankable. And in order to get there, it requires collaboration. Collaboration with governments, policy setters, with the private sector, with our industrial clients, but also with our SMEs, because our SMEs have quite some steps to take in order to create efficiency measures or have access to efficiency measures. So thinking about what's needed in order to get there and to create bankable projects, I think it's a lot about collaboration as a first point. Collaboration including but not limited to blended finance, in order to understand the risks associated with projects and match the right type of capital to the right type of risk, distributing the risk out and creating bankable projects this way. It's about consistency. You named it as well, consistency in legal frameworks and regulatory frameworks, because investors and capital at the end is all in competition with other opportunities to invest, requires consistency and security. And when you take an investment decision, you want to be on the safe side that you understand the legal framework you're investing in. So I can only highlight and underline this point. But thirdly, really, it's about creating the demand, because what we observe when it comes to projects not being bankable, it might be a lack of economically viable business cases. And that's also because the demand side is not yet committing to, in particular, long-term agreements in order to invest and sign up for certain price points or understanding price points. So promoting demand and also creating demand-side measures is quite critical. Two more points in that perspective. I'm coming from Europe. Deutsche Bank is a very, very strong bank in Europe and really aiming to become a European champion. I have to underline that also the savings and union, the capital markets union, is something the European Union is discussing and working on for quite some time. And it's really seen as very, very important in order to create a depth of market and capital decisions being brought to Europe, which would definitely support those steps being successful in Europe. And then last but not least, also coming to the narrative, efficiency, we all know the energy costs at the moment. They are preventing some production to be geared up. Energy efficiencies will create more competitiveness. And I think we need to carry that message in a very understandable language out, that where we create markets which have energy efficiencies in place and certain energy costs brought down, it will create a more competitive landscape for investors to invest, for production to be secured, but also maybe newly attracted. So it's really about creating also this positive narrative around it, it will have a positive side effect of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, which we all want, but it's also about competitiveness and sustainable growth in the long run.
Very good. Thank you very much, Lavinia. You mentioned climate, and let me broaden it out. I'd like to hear from anybody on the theme of climate, because we know that energy efficiency is possibly the biggest lever we have to reduce energy-related emissions. COP28 saw a very important moment that we were pleased to be involved in, seeing a global target set for 2030. And today we had a very good discussion with the COP31 presidency, where again the IEA is pleased to be working with them towards bringing efficiency back to the heart of the emissions reduction and climate debate. And yet we're not on target for our existing targets, and I think probably in 2026, in the midst of a crisis, it's probably fair to say that we're hearing maybe less, or you can tell me if you disagree, we're hearing less about the climate dimension of these issues, and we're talking about, rightly, these other dimensions that are also very important. And I suppose my broad question for any of you is to comment on whether you think the crisis moment and the focus on that is in danger of pushing climate off the table, or it's the opportunity to bring it back in and really reunite these issues. Anybody solve that problem for me? Go on, please.
To start, and then I'm sure others can join in. I'll switch to Spanish again.
For us, everything is related. The good thing, the energy transition is a necessary solution to climate crisis, but it's to give a solution if it dependency and loss of sovereignty is the transition what makes us recover this sovereignty. So it's a problem. It's a transition what will allow us to have a more efficiency. If it's a problem of inequalities, in the Spanish case, for example, this is socially progressive because now we have the electrical bill in the distribution of the family cost. It means that the vulnerable home are those who are going to benefit in proportion, and the solutions, not only in the causes but in the consequences of climate change, are related. With colleagues who were talking about these weeks, Europe has seen various heat waves in many parts in the Spanish country. The necessity to adapt to these new situations, and we are seeing the renewable energies change everything. Before, to have air conditioning to protect ourselves in front of the heat would have foreseen more fuels, but today what we have, the economist said it before, to have the air conditioning without feeling guilty, to be able to have refrigeration to generate conditions, healthy conditions, well-being in public service, almost free, taking advantage of the excellence that we have belonging to the solar energy. This week, in the Spanish case, we have approved a new 200 million euros to have air conditioning in schools. We understand electricity is for the consumption. Renewable solar energy in centers will allow being more efficient and protect our children, our youth in school centers. And for us, the climate agenda is, we cannot separate from the crisis. And if you allow me, Brian, is what we have heard in these sessions. There is a consensus among the countries and businesses that are very aligned to fight against climate crisis and energy crisis.
Thank you. Yes, Edmund, please.
That was definitely very insightful, and I think that's definitely the right way forward. So for Sierra Leone, we have to look at, or I can only speak from our contribution towards climate change and our contribution where we sit in that. In general, climate change or our climate issues were caused by the industrialization of larger and more industrialized economies. And I come from a country where we are dealing with the impacts of that, less than contributing towards that. However, in the next 10 and 20 years, as we are looking to move from low income to middle income and higher income, we are going to be industrializing our own economies as well. So what we need to do is to make sure that we are investing in green industrialization so that our contribution or our impacts on the climate will not be the same as previous modes of industrial activity. Another area where countries like Sierra Leone can do things different is, so Sierra Leone has over 75% tree cover. You look at countries in other regions who you're now talking about low double digits, some even single digit tree cover. What we can do is to make sure that as we're industrializing, we are also ensuring that we prioritize nature conservation. We have already started a program to look at how we can use our carbon credits to help others or use our carbon credits towards mining operations in Sierra Leone who want to use that to offset. And we're also looking at something new called renewable energy credits, which reward 1 credit per megawatt hour of production. And so if we can mobilize credits off of our renewable resources, we can then use those additional revenues to reinvest in areas where our countrymen or where our people have been affected by climate change. So if we're earning however much it is from credits per year, we can use that to make our coastal communities more resilient. We can use that to look at conserving our mangroves. We can use that to look at conserving our rainforest. So I guess that would be our use of new technologies and new instruments in energy to help us cushion whether it's our contribution to climate change or it's our impacts from climate change.
That's very interesting. And of course, the resources you mentioned earlier will be very important for clean energy technologies as well. So there's another opportunity for Sierra Leone. Thank you. Minister, please.
Sí, bueno,
Yes, well, with what has to do with Peru, we already have an energy policy that dates from the 1950s, and one of the pillars is the climate, the reduction of CO2 to avoid global warming. As pillars, there's 4, basically. The first being, and that is a worldwide policy, but it's universal access to energy. And we have to create energy, but we have to be efficient to ensure continuity of service and to give people the possibility of having access to it while still having control over the demand so that we can have strategies. And that is when we start to talk about intelligent meters that I was talking about earlier on. But the entire infrastructure brings to the second pillar, which is modern, efficient infrastructure, which is absolutely necessary. And that is where there's also the entire theme of renewable energies. Because, we have to be able to do things more efficiently. All the electrification has to be implemented with, for example, solar panels. So Peru has a lot, has very abundant energy, whether it be hydroelectric, whether it be wind, whether it be solar. We're very lucky in terms of country. We're also a mining country. The third, for example, producer of copper worldwide. So there are activities that truly, let's say, in one way or another, do have an impact with environmental pollution, for example. But we have been developing scientific ways of replacing that infrastructure so that we have things that don't pollute as much. And as well to replace the thermal energy generation with solar panels. So then that way we can work with a multilateral bank with 25 districts that right now are using oil, but that is being replaced with renewable energy, most of them solar panels. So that's, the second pillar. The third part is everything with having to do with the protection of the environment, the reducing CO2 and fighting global warming. And then the fourth, which is also very important, is everything having to do with integration. The integration of the different systems in order to be able to ensure continuity of services. And that not only as a country, but at the regional level, with neighboring countries, we've already created, for example, bilateral contract with Ecuador to be able to work with them. We're also working with Chile and with Brazil so that we be able to use energy and replace our traditional energy with renewable energy, and to be able to do that together with other countries.
And the breadth of your strategic vision, it's very inspiring to hear. Thank you. So colleagues, unlike Rosalinda, I don't have a magic pen, but I will be asking her where to buy one later on. But we just have a few minutes left, and I'd like to go back to you one more time each, and I'll start with Lavinia, and then I'll give you the last word, Minister. And I'd maybe ask you to think, maybe just very super brief, one thing you've learned today, or one idea you've had, one idea you're stealing from somebody else, something you're bringing home as a lesson you've learned today. So Lavinia, sorry to put you on the spot, but...
So really in our earlier conversation, there was a very strong point made to look at the lifetime cost of investments and considering efficiency gains in that calculation. So this brings me back to the narrative question. I think we need to really create a narrative which understands that we all want and need access to abundance of energy. His Excellency called it universal access to energy. We need abundance of energy. That also means that efficiency gains creates abundance for others. And access to renewable energy is the most affordable way to create that access. It will be absolutely critical for transformation. So that's underlining the point.
Excellent. Thank you, Lavinia. Marie-Claude, please.
I would say I really like the Montreal framework because nothing can work alone. Policymakers, companies, and we thought actually that we were missing the end consumer from that framework, because if we want to impact the behaviors, the end consumer, whether is a residential or commercial, needs to be included and part of the mix as well. So I think it's that back to the full cycle, but it's a system, and it needs to be connected for it to work.
Thank you. Very insightful. Thank you. Deputy Minister Noni, please.
Thank you very much. One major thing that I've walked away from here with is the need for peer-to-peer exchange, whether it's on policy concepts and innovation, or how to engage with people at the consumer level. And very interesting insights from the panel here also with the minister from Peru, talking about smart systems and how to use smart systems to make dynamic decisions. So from a country where, again, in a lot of our grids, we are able to go straight to some of these new technologies. It's very interesting and it's very insightful to learn how these uses of these of smart grids are already making a difference in other people's economies and other people's countries. And it's definitely something that we've already been looking at, and we're even more encouraged to invest more time and effort and finances in that.
Great to hear. Thank you. Secretary Gorzard, please.
Para mí, una de las...
For me, one of the most interesting conclusions probably of this entire day has been how transformative energy efficiency is with the challenges that we are Somebody was saying that we are at the beginning of the end of one of the major crises that we have experienced in decades, one in which about 20% of the world oil access remained completely blocked because the Strait of Hormuz was closed. So that is essentially what it means, and that 20% is the magnitude of what we can save in energy if we are more careful. So since the year 2000s, we suppose that the countries of the agency have saved 20%, as I was saying, in fossil fuels. It is as important as a crisis that we just saw. So we see the impact that energy efficiency could bring us. It's not something that is marginal. It's not incremental. It's not doing things a little bit better. No, efficiency changes fundamentally what we're doing, and it creates energy abundance, as my colleague here was saying. And it is one of the things that I think that is going to really stay in my mind. It's one of the main things that I will have learned.
Your key lesson of the day, so we do appreciate that. Minister, I ask you, please.
Sí.
Yes, thank you. Well, the conclusion, in one way or another, what we're looking for is to get benefits, to reduce costs, to reduce emissions, but all the alternatives that we are adopting, in one way or another, they incorporate technology. So when we incorporate technology, that's one of the tools that will allow us to be more efficient and competitive.
And colleagues, we are coming to the end of day one. Thank you for being with us, and thank you to our excellent panelists. Before we thank them, let me just say two things. One is, please, we hope to see you all tomorrow. We have another fascinating day of panel discussions starting early tomorrow morning, so please come and join us and participate fully, and I hope to chat to as many of you as you can there as well. But in the meantime, please join us for dinner. So you're all invited to join us for dinner. Dinner is upstairs if you just leave the room and go upstairs. And if you're actually invited to the VIP dinner in the Musée de Beaux-Arts, please go down the stairs and there'll be shuttle buses leaving soon. So 2 sets of stairs leading you to dinner one way or the other, and we hope you will join us accordingly. And in the meantime, before we do anything else, let's please warmly thank our excellent panelists. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.